Hey, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's that time of week again. Everybody's favorite segment on YouTube, the MLB Power Rankings. Guys, we're reaching the end of June. We only got, 3 months left before the end of the season. Top row pretty much securing up. There are going to be playoff teams. Bottom row, pretty much teams that are going to be out of it. But everyone in between still jockeying for position. Some teams going on streaks, some teams falling down the board. We're going to go through all 30 of them, but before I do, just a reminder that at 1,700 subs on this channel, we are going to be giving away a team hat. So make sure you are a subscriber if you are new, and just fun stuff like that. We're going to jump right into it. Got 30 teams to rip through at number 30. Going to stick at the bottom. They did manage to avoid being a complete weak sweep for themselves by picking up a come from behind win today against the Brewers, picking up the one win of the week. They also got swept by the Dodgers. Not going to talk too much about the Rockies because they have been number 30 for like 10 straight weeks. At number 29, dropping back down here, even though they did have a series win this week against the San Francisco Giants over the weekend, Giants have been struggling, so I'm not going to bolster them. They have had back-to-back weeks now where they have had winning 500 weeks for the White Sox. But when I start matching them up, in my opinion, against some of the other teams, I just don't really think they're really much better than anyone other than the Rockies at this point. Could you argue maybe a couple of the other teams? Sure, that's okay. They do go 1-2 against Arizona, a team that we saw just finish up their series. We'll get to them in a second. Number 28, moving up one spot. I did have them at number 29 last week. Kind of saw a little bit of some life coming back to this team after a little bit of a cold streak that they went on a few weeks leading up to this one. 1-2 against the Padres. They did have an insane series that just ended against the LA Angels, winning 2 out of 3, going to extras today. And that first game on Friday, back and forth, both teams scoring basically double digits. But the offense on this team is something to be excited about. And when we saw them play the Padres earlier this week, we saw the guys that were a part of that Juan Soto trade kind of highlighting themselves in a big way in the win there. So overall, 500 week for Washington. A little bit more excitement, I guess, around this team than the other two teams. At number 27, we do have the Athletics. Overall, I think in the league, they are the second worst run differential. They are the worst in the American League. But overall, I still think offensively they are there. It's just the pitching has been atrocious. Severino, on one hand, we look at his splits at home, just absolutely terrible, 6+ ERA. But on the road, he seems all right. He might be potential trade bait coming forward. But Athletics at home, it just does not seem like a home field advantage for this team. I think it's starting to catch up to them a little bit. 1-2 against Detroit, 1-2 against the Yankees. So overall, they lose both series. They are playing top-tier teams. We do see some moments where, like against the Yankees, they do put up massive runs and shut them down somewhat. But at the same time, in the 2 losses, they did get kind of beat up, especially today, giving up 2 home runs to Judge. Kind of the issue with the Athletics is that their bullpen cannot hold leads whatsoever. At number 26, this one has been a little bit, these next two have been a little bit considering to maybe potentially moving up out of this bottom row. But at the end of the day, the bottom row is teams that have no shot at the playoffs. I think the Pirates are that team that National League Central appears to be somewhat of a stronger division. The 4 teams ahead of them in the division are light years ahead of them, I think, in terms of potential and where they're going. 1-2 against Milwaukee, and then we see a weekend sweep against the New York Mets. Just out of nowhere, they were piling on runs all weekend. It's been like Pittsburgh's number one nemesis was being able to score runs, and they seem to figure it out this weekend. And honestly, if you look at the past 30 games, Pittsburgh has not been super bad. There's been teams above them on this board that have probably been worse. But I think they just really dug themselves a hole, especially in this division. So at this point, I'm going to keep them there, and mainly because number 25 has just been on an absolute heater. I think 7 wins in a row now that we just saw them close out Arizona for the sweep there. They swept the Giants earlier in the week, so they went 6-0 this week against the National League West. You could argue that this team is on their way out of the bottom row, and I think they were out of the bottom row a few weeks earlier in the season as well, but I think the thing for me was the division is not, the playoffs is not there, all that, but maybe when we start getting the next 2 teams, same kind of story. The team's not making the playoffs is starting to stretch a little bit further up the board. But all the teams that we are going to talk about in the next row, they have had these similar kind of win streaks. So I'm not just because they're the hottest team right this second. I think overall we got to look at the grand scheme of things when it comes to baseball, power rankings. What team is going to be more powerful going forward? Right now, I'm not ready to buy the Marlins. The one thing that has impressed me this week with the Marlins has been their pitching, most definitely. Number 24, kind of sticking into that spot. Another team that I don't really think playoffs is within the cards, but at the end of the day, these teams going forward are 7 or less games out of a playoff spot. We've seen crazier things happen with more games behind in September. So the fact that we have 3 months, it's not out of the question. And we have seen a little bit of life of Baltimore, especially this weekend when they piled on the 22 runs against Tampa Bay, managed to win that series. A little bit of a comeback. So overall, I think they played Tampa, was it last week where they split 2-2? Overall, 4-3 against Tampa over the past 2 weeks. So something to be a little bit excited about with the Baltimore Orioles. On the other side, they got a little bit of revenge after being up 8-0 and blowing that game. They were down 6-0, came back and win that as well. So a little bit of highlight for the weekend here. The one downside for Baltimore this week was that they lost the series to Texas, another team that had been struggling, kind of in the same boat, in the same row on this power rankings board, and they just can't find the win there. So I think the fact that they're way behind here right now, they're not managing to really put big streaks together. We saw a little bit of life in them. I'd like to see a little bit more. Number 23, seems like the life has been kind of sucked out of the Kansas City Royals, especially if you're comparing them to last year. Both these teams met last year in the playoffs, by the way. Kansas City 0-3 against Tampa to start the week, 1-2 against the Dodgers over the weekend. I'm not going to hold it against the Dodgers, but you got to find some wins. The Royals have the pitching. They have some people in this lineup that are very, very talented and that are going to be going to the All-Star game. But the Royals are not really the same team. They're not managing to figure it out as they did last year. Maybe they got a little bit of an advantage last year. The Twins weren't as good. The White Sox were worse, believe it or not, and they managed to take advantage of maybe a central division that wasn't as strong and now potentially, arguably, the strongest right now in the American League. So the Royals are a little bit back, and we're starting to look at teams that are on the outside looking in, especially in the playoff race. And Diamondbacks at number 22 kind of bolstered that opinion that they just don't have it again this year after falling a little bit short last year going to the playoffs. It's been an ugly season for them. They played some of the most wild games all season. Started the week off on the right note, winning a series against the White Sox. Love to see a sweep when you're playing these low teams, but not necessarily there. 2 games out of 3. And then they get swept by the Marlins. So if you came into this week as a Diamondbacks fan, saw you were playing the White Sox, saw you were playing the Marlins, and then you were going to be told that you had a losing 2-4 week, you would not be happy whatsoever. And the fact that they're in the National League West, it's just not going to help them their case, and especially going forward. Number 21, moving up a few spots, and mainly because the other teams have not been impressive. The Twins, on the other hand, have not also been impressive, and they are playing on Sunday night tonight. If you remember our Discord, we were kind of talking about the Sunday nighter and how it seems to be the same teams recycled. And this week is a special Detroit versus Minnesota, one that you don't really see super often, but it's probably because Scooble's out there. But as you guys might not know, or if you do know, we are filming this before that game takes place. I think they just started the first inning when I hit film. But right now they're split 1-1 with Detroit, 2-2 with Seattle. So overall 500 a week against 2 of the playoff-bound teams. So helped Minnesota in the case of these teams just looked worse this week. Number 20, kind of sticking around the same spot. What a interesting series they played this week against Seattle. All 3 games go to extra innings. They fall short at home, losing 2 out of the 3. Just back and forth. Like 2 of the games went to 12 innings actually as well. They do beat Baltimore earlier in the week. 500 a week for Texas. And at the end of the day, they're right there in the thick of it. I think 5 games out of wild card, maybe even a bit more. But they are 4th in the division, and it's only up from here potentially for Texas, number 19. One of the teams that was falling the most this week. I think they had a 6-game losing streak before they won yesterday, putting up 15 runs yesterday against the Blue Jays. They lose the series to the Jays on the rubber match today. So they win 1 out of 2 or out of 3 there, and then they get swept earlier in the week by the Angels, which ended their long West Coast road trip. So you would have liked to see, as a Boston fan, them come back from that trip and win a series against the division rival Jays, a team that they are chasing But so far this season, the Boston Red Sox just have not had the Jays number. I think that's 3 series now that the Jays have played them and won them all. So Boston, their offense ever since the Devers trade, just not good. But at the same time, it seems like both those teams are not working out very well. Number 18, just talked about how they swept Boston. On the flip side, they go into this weekend, and it's a series where I would have loved to see them win, and they fall short against the Washington Nationals. The Angels are one of those tough teams. They're sitting there right on the 500 mark right now. And coming in this season, not really a lot of what people predicted. But they have the pitching that kind of gets them there. And at times, this offense just explodes. It's one of the most unpredictable teams I find this season, whether or not they're going to win. They beat the good teams. We've seen them sweep the Dodgers. We've seen them sweep the Yankees. We see them beat Boston, and then they fall short here. It's just like, what's going on with this team? Are they capable of making the playoffs? I don't really buy it. I kind of why I have them where I do have them, but at the same time, they're right there in the thick of it. A lot could be said of where they are at number 17, a team that technically has a worse record. But I just think the potential is there, and if these two teams faced off best of 7, I would lean Atlanta, of course, and with their injuries coming back, I expect them overall to be a better team, but this week would have been one of those weeks that you would have loved to see Atlanta have a much stronger week. They were playing the Mets, they were playing the Phillies, they were starting to get healthy, and they're way back at the playoff race. So this is where their rebuild would have started. But they started 2-0 against the Mets, and then they lose the next 2 to end up splitting that series. That sets them back, and they lose the series over the weekend to the Philadelphia Phillies. So overall, a 3-4 week against the 2 teams they're chasing. It's not going to help them too much at the end of it, but they do have the potential to get back in this race. Top 12, right? Next up, number 16. Just not a great weekend for the Cleveland Guardians, getting swept by the Cardinals. 1-5 on the week overall because they took 1 win in the series against the Blue Jays. But the Guardians continue to have their struggles after somewhat of a decent early May. But it's not been a lot going forward. No streaks going for them lately. But at the end of the day, I still have them right there in the middle. They are above 500. They are in the thick of it. But it's one team getting hotter below them and them still playing at their pace. It's just going to be them continually falling down the board. Number 15, Padres. I don't know what to say about this Padres team. They came into this weekend after winning a series against the Nationals, which, great. They beat teams that are low, and then they play a team that they're going to be right there at the end of it, fighting for a playoff spot in the Cincinnati Reds, and they fall short, especially blowing the game today, the rubber match in the 9th inning. Padres just seems like they're just missing some sort of pizzazz, and it's not coming all together. And they're ever since that April, it was a strong April. They were at number 1 on this board at one point, but ever since then, it's just not coming together. They do have the talent. You would think at times we see the pitching delivering low-scoring games, and then at the same time, the bats aren't delivering. It seems like to me the bats are the biggest problem lately, but yeah, number 15 seems like an underperforming year for them. At number 14, just talked about that comeback win today against the Padres. They are edging their way forward. They didn't really get tested today, this week, like I thought they need to be tested to really move them off this board. Overall, they do win both series against the Padres. They beat the Yankees 2 games out of 3. But I talked about it last week. I need to see Cincinnati in their own division, because when we see them play in their division as of late, they are not finding wins. And at the end of the day, that is what's going to be important, because this division has turned into the powerhouse, it appears, in the National League, which is somewhat surprising. We got 4 teams right there in the thick of it. Right now, I have them as 4th in the division, as you can tell. At number 13, one of the biggest fallers on the board, and a lot of this has to do with the National League having a little bit of a shuffle this week, with Cincinnati having a good week, Padres right there in the thick of it as well, Milwaukee's starting to get hot, the Cardinals are getting hot, Central seems to be getting hotter, so that is leading in the National League West, cooling off a bit, at least in the power rankings. And I can't blame them. The Giants are just struggling right now. 0-3 against Miami, 1-2 against the White Sox. So they lose both series against teams in the bottom row. Ever since this Devers trade, just seems to not be working out for them. But maybe that kind of struggle was already there. I think I talked about it last week, but they were leading the league in terms of winning games with 5 or less hits by a large margin. And maybe that type of analytic is starting to flatten out for them. we'll see what's going forward. Pitching-wise, they're there. They need to start finding some hits, and that was their issue. Feels like been their issue for the past couple of years. Number 12, finding their way back into the top 2 rows. Cardinals continuing to impress on all fronts. If it wasn't for Mikolas, they would have had a pretty stellar week, especially on the pitching side. 3-0 against Cleveland to end the week. 2-2 against the Cubs, a split series against top-tier Cubs. Got to be pretty excited with that. And as long as they keep this pace going and really beat up on the teams and split with the Cubs, they're going to be on their way to the playoffs. And the Cardinal fans got to be excited about it. 11, sticking up in this row for feels like 3 weeks in a row, and I'm a little bit surprised to have them here still. 2-1 against Cleveland, 2-1 against Boston, 2 series wins again for the Jays. I think overall it's something they've won 9 of their last 11 series, something in that vicinity. And the Jays seem to have found some sort of help in the bottom end of the rotation, which has been the biggest concern in the bottom 5 rotation in the league right now. Scherzer's back. We saw him pitch his first bat. Pitching again tomorrow, and Lars seems to be working out for them. So overall, Jays finding some offense as well this week. Other than the one game where they got blown out by the Red Sox, it was a pretty overall good week for them. Now, this week is going to be a true test. They have a 4-game set at home against the New York Yankees, and the Yankees last time they met, about a month and a half ago, the Yankees really piled on offensively. So if they can tone that back, they are 3 games back from the Yankees. Maybe the gap can close in this division, but if they fall short in this Yankees, I think this might be the peak point for the Blue Jays. They do get to end the All-Star break before playing a lot of the teams in the bottom row too, so that's going to be interesting to watch. Number 10, kind of maintaining status quo. What talked about it already against Texas. That series was just crazy. I think they had a couple of comebacks in that one to win in the extras as well. Texas had a couple of times where they were at bat in a tie game in the bottom, and they just could not deliver an extra inning. So on top, I got to give credit where credit is due to the closers and relief pitchers of the Seattle Mariners. On top of that, their rotation we know is one of the stronger ones. 2-2 against Minnesota earlier in the week. Overall, winning week, keeping it going. And as long as they keep having winning weeks, I think they deserve a top 10 spot. Number 9, Brewers just narrowly avoided or missed out on sweeping the Rockies this weekend, which is what I really want to see. Both times Brewers did not manage to sweep the Rockies this year. So I think overall 4-2 against the Rockies. Yeah, well, you're not going to hold that against them. 2-1 against Pittsburgh. Winning week, 4-2 week against bottom teams. It's what you got to do. If you're a top 10 team, you're going to do that. So let's keep the Brewers going and what they're going to do against upper talent. Number 8. I think this is the exact same spot they were last week. Overall, 3-0 against Kansas City, followed up by a lost series to Baltimore. You can't win every series, especially when you're in those division matchups. They tend to be a lot more hard played, and they tend to be able to go either way. So I'm not going to hold too much against Tampa. There is some concern with the pitching, especially coming out of that Baltimore series. They did manage to give up quite a few runs. Of course, they shut down Kansas City a little bit. But that seems to be kind of the status quo for Kansas City. But Tampa's one of those teams that right now they're at 8, and it seems optimistic for them to be able to stay there. That's kind of what it feels like in my gut. But at the same time, Tampa has proven time and time again, this is where they belong. So I got to at least give it to them for now. But I would not be surprised if things start to turn a little south for the Rays. Number 7. Speaking of teams that have had it turn south, and it seems to be turning south pretty quickly, the New York Mets just get swept over the weekend here by the Pirates. On top of that, they almost had disaster against the Atlanta Braves to start the week. We talked about that a little bit already, but something seems to be going on in New York here with the Mets. Maybe it's the typical Mets are going to Met. I don't know exactly what's going on. If you're a Mets fan, you get to this point, let me know in the comments. What do you think is driving this force of a team of struggle right now? Juan Soto, of course, not really living up to his expectation. The rotation, maybe they're kind of waiting for these guys to come back. I don't know. But the way that the Pirates just piled on runs over this weekend, there's got to be some concern. The Phillies definitely starting to find a way to get away with it. Atlanta, they're starting to get healthy. Of course, there's 3 months and less than 10 games. It's definitely something that can be covered. And at the end of the day, Mets are in the wild card spot. and only, I think, 3 games up. So that's not very secure at this point. And the Mets are definitely got to have some concern. Number 6. Yankees, I think going into this week, there was a little bit of concern on what was going on there. They started the week again to not winning the series against Cincinnati. And overall, there's got to be concern in New York. They did have a pretty significant lead in this division. I think it was up to 8 games at one point. It's now shrunk to 1.5 over Tampa and only 3 over Toronto. And the Yankees have a tough series playing Toronto this week. So it's going to be interesting. We haven't seen a whole lot of Yankees in their division, at least as of late, it feels like. Maybe it's just because I haven't seen a lot of Toronto Yankees this year. But we'll see, and if they can hold on to this. And right now it's starting to shrink a little bit. 2-1 against the Athletics, 1-2 against Cincinnati, 500. Yeah, 500, you're going to be pretty happy. If your worst weeks are 500, you're going to be pretty happy. Number 5, we have the Chicago Cubs dropping a few spots after a series that was a really tight, fun series to watch against the Houston Astros this weekend. If it wasn't for McCullers, I think they might have had a little bit of an offensive robust situation, but they did find it on Saturday. They go 1-2 against Houston, 2-2 against the Cardinals. So a little bit of a sub 500 week. I think we are starting to see a little bit more of what I expected to see out of the Cubs. Offensively, they're there, but pitching, I think I should say they were there this weekend. The pitching definitely. But I think it's going to be a little bit of reality when they start facing some of these top-tier teams, and I think we saw it this weekend with Houston. Number 4, working their way back. I always had them in the top row, and then I really punished them after they went on a little bit of a cold streak and went down. I think they went down as low as 11th, but they battled their way back, even though 0-3 against Houston to start the week. But I think Houston's one of the hottest teams in the league right now, so didn't hold too much against them. I do like the way Philly has set up themselves in this division, going 2-1 against Atlanta as well this weekend, really pushing them down, not really giving Atlanta any hope to get back in this race. So I did like to see that, and I do start to believe the way the Mets have been playing that they are going to kind of start walking away with this, but maybe that's just a pipe dream. I don't know. Number 3, highest they've been on the board this year. Familiar territory for this team. They seem to end up in this top row every year for the past 6 years. We've been doing this. 3-0 against Philly, 2-1 against the Cubs, 5-1 against teams in the top row this week after they were in the top row themselves. Got to give credit where credit is due. The only loss coming off the back of Lance McCullers, who, when you see him on the mound, I'm a little concerned, but I do expect Houston to address that position by the time it really becomes an issue. So Houston, I think, is in a very prime spot. I think they are 7 or 8 games up on their division now, in a good spot. Speaking of teams up in their division, we got Detroit. I think they are maybe closing on double digits in their division, but Detroit finding right now split. They're playing the Sunday nighter. We talked about that. 1-1 against Minnesota coming in today. With Skubal on the mound, you would expect them to finish it, but last Skubal outing, I think they lost. At least Skubal gave up a few runs. Maybe they came back and won that one still. But 2-1 against Athletics. Overall, if they beat Minnesota today, it's a 4-2 week, continuing the status quo of being the top team in the American League. Kind of the team to chase right now for the Detroit Tigers. But overall, as we know, the team to chase in the league appears to be the LA Dodgers yet again. 3-0 against the Rockies, 2-1 against the Royals, 5-1 week. And we see Ohtani out there pitching for his 3rd game now. It's still 1 or 2 innings, right? It's not a big deal, but if he can work his way up to being a starter that they need, because right now that seems to be what the Dodgers need, or do they? They're still number 1. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Let me know what you guys think. There you have it, 1 through 30 MLB Power Rankings. June's coming to an end, 3 months left in the season. I'm looking forward to how it's going to play out. I'm sure you guys are too. Let me know if you agree, disagree, etc., etc. We will see you for that next video.